So now we catch up on the latest news and sport with Moira Stewart.
The Police Federation has called for tougher penalties for people who carry knives. A detective constable was stabbed to death in the West End of London. Firebombs have closed a shopping centre for the third weekend in a row. And Mikhail Gorbachev has said he'll stay on to help the Soviet Union's transition to a Commonwealth. Good evening. The Police Federation are calling for tougher penalties against people who carry knives after an off-duty officer was stabbed and killed in central London last night. They also want the sale of knives to be controlled by licence. The officer who was killed has been named as Detective Constable Jim Morrison. He was stabbed while chasing a man who'd been acting suspiciously.
Police inquiries continue today at Montreal Place, the alley off the Aldwych in London's Theatreland where the fatal stabbing occurred. They searched all night for the knife that was used by Detective Constable Morrison's killer. The off-duty policeman was chasing a white man of medium build, about 30 years old and wearing a brown leather bomber jacket when he was stabbed at about 10:30 last night. Jim Morrison would have been 27 next week. He leaves a widow, Victoria. A policeman for 8 years, colleagues say he was brave and popular.
I mean, it really is a tragic loss when somebody whose job it is to look after the interests of the people of London, when doing just that, in fact, suffers the sort of cowardly attack that we've experienced all too much of.
There have been 60 knife attacks on London policemen this year, including another 2 officers wounded last night and Sergeant Alan King killed 2 weeks ago. The Police Federation wants more powers to stop and search.
We would like to see the sale of knives governed by a licence. And if the government will say to us, as they have, that that includes cutlery, then so be it.
Police want the public to take knives to special bins at stations like this one, yards from last night's crime. Their message to the public: don't carry knives.
And the police are tonight checking a 4th suspected firebomb that was found after the previous 3 had closed one of Britain's biggest shopping centres for half a day. 2 went off at Brent Cross in North London, a 3rd didn't ignite. The anti-terrorist branch has confirmed that the bombs were similar to those used by the IRA recently in central London, Manchester and Blackpool.
The alarm was raised in the early hours of this morning. After 2 weekends of firebombs planted after Saturday's business, the IRA ensured that this time the best day's takings would be hit. 70,000 shoppers were expected at Brent Cross today, but by mid-morning the centre was still virtually deserted. Staff went in, not to open up, but to help look for further devices and clear up the mess caused by the sprinkler systems. They doused the small fires started at C&A and Phoenix. A 3rd firebomb at John Lewis didn't ignite properly. The firebombs may not have done much physical damage, but have had their effect nonetheless. Trade ruined on what should have been one of the busiest days of the year. The centre opened its doors at 1:30, but it couldn't have been less like a normal Saturday. Several £1 million worth of business may have been lost.
It's a terrible blow. I mean, we expect to be, a very, very busy day, and obviously it's going to affect us really, really seriously.
The Salvation Army played on, but there were fewer people to hear them. For the 3rd weekend running, terrorists disrupted commercial life with minimum effort and very little risk.
After hinting that he might resign next week, President Gorbachev now says he wants to help the Soviet Union through its transition to a Commonwealth of independent states. He told Time magazine, "I feel strong enough to go on." And his Foreign Minister Edward Shevardnadze has advised him not to be in too big a hurry to go.
In his interview with American journalists, Mr. Gorbachev said he wants to use his powers as President and Commander-in-Chief to steer his country into the new Commonwealth. He believes the experience he's built up should be put to use. "I feel strong enough to go on," said Mr. Gorbachev. That doesn't necessarily mean that he will, and the hints from the Kremlin are still that he is preparing to go. But today his close friend and Foreign Minister Edvard Shevardnadze told reporters that he's been urging Mr. Gorbachev to take his time before giving up.
Both he and I want to encourage the formation of a Commonwealth. I think he can make a very useful contribution to this process. I've advised Mr. Gorbachev not to rush into resignation.
The President has given an assurance that he will keep control of nuclear weapons during the transition from the old Soviet Union to the new Commonwealth. He says speculation about whose finger's on the button is alarmist. And in a 30-minute phone call to President Bush, he's promised the command and control system here is secure.
Bad weather has affected today's sport. 16 Barclays League football matches were postponed and today's rugby union programme was virtually wiped out. With news of what survived, Rob Bonnet.
Leeds United's sequence of 6 consecutive home league wins has finally been broken, but they've still increased their lead at the top of the First Division. Their visitors were Tottenham, for whom David Howells opened the scoring in the 19th minute. It was cancelled out by Gary Speed, the Welsh international, shortly before half-time. Manchester City, in 4th place, also dropped home points to Queen's Park Rangers, despite a well-worked early first goal from David White. And then the relief of seeing Steve Redmond's blocked penalty rescued by Keith Curle. But Rangers came back in the second half, first through Roy Wegerle after 54 minutes, and then just 2 minutes from the end as Dennis Bailey got the last touch. Manchester City 2, Queen's Park Rangers 2. So Leeds' lead at the top is now 2 points. Manchester United play tomorrow and Sheffield Wednesday's match was postponed. Aston Villa lost 2-0 at Sheffield United. Arsenal's match was also off. Everton drew 2-2 at Oldham and Liverpool beat Nottingham Forest 2-0. In Scotland, yet another Scott Crabb penalty put Hearts on their way against Motherwell, and an Ali McCoist goal after he'd earlier missed a penalty helped Rangers to a comfortable win at Falkirk. With the top 4 all winning, the Premier Division stays as before. Celtic beat St Mirren 4-0 and Hibs won 3-0 at Airdrie. Michael Chang is through to the final of the world's richest tennis tournament, the Grand Slam Cup, in Munich. In a gruelling match lasting nearly 5 hours, Chang finally overcame Ivan Lendl, coming from 2 sets down to win 9-7 in the final set. John Arlott, whose distinctive cricket commentaries for the BBC earned him the respect and affection of millions, has died at his home in the Channel Islands. He was 77 and had been ill for some time. The Prime Minister, John Major, was amongst the first to pay tribute to him, describing him as the very personification of cricket.
For 34 years, John Arlott's mellow, rustic voice was synonymous with summer and with cricket.
That was as good a ball as Willis has bowled. It was up, it was on a length, it was on line, it moved in a little, and Richard simply walked into it and on drove it.
His first commentary was in 1946. After that, he never missed a test in England. A former Hampshire policeman, Arlott flirted unsuccessfully with politics in the 50s as a Liberal candidate. But by now, his love of cricket was dominant. At the microphone, he was peerless.
I suppose again the Grays pushes him out on the outside, it's caught and bowled.
Arlott wrote too, more than 40 books and regular reports for the Guardian newspaper. He wrote as well on wine, another of his great loves. It was perhaps his ultimate pleasure, sipping a fine red, talking cricket. His affection for the game enchanted both colleagues and generations of players.
His greatest contribution to cricket, he was cricket. There's never been a commentator like him, there never will be. There's a few that have tried to impersonate him. John simply was Test match special.
I think he spread the gospel of cricket around the world more than anybody else, because they, from igloos in Iceland down to the outback in Australia, they heard this sort of voice which brought up smells of bat oil and grass and village greens, you know, with churches and pubs. It was cricket.
Arlott's last Test commentary was the centenary match against Australia at Lord's in 1980. He left unobtrusively, no fuss, no goodbyes.
69 for 2, and after Trevor Bailey, it will be Christopher Martin Jenkins.
But the spontaneous applause of his fellow commentators said it all.
That's it. News and Sport on BBC One is at 9:35.